Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another Center for Agricultural Profitability webinar. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm a communications specialist with the center here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I want to remind you, you can always find an updated schedule of webinars that we have forthcoming on our website at cap.unl.edu. Just look for the webinar page there. And you can also find recordings of past webinars that we've done, including this one and the one we did a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Elliott Dennis. It was kind of more of an overview of the Weaned Calf Risk Protection Program. So again, thank you for joining us. And today we're going to be talking about some pricing that has recently come out for the Weaned Calf Risk Protection Program, which the USDA Risk Management Agency recently released. Again, it's for this new federally subsidized insurance product. And again, a couple of weeks ago, we reviewed how the product works, reporting requirements, indemnity payouts, et cetera. And you can review that recording again on our website, cap.unl.edu. As I mentioned earlier this month, RMA did release projected prices for 2025 and premium rates by county for the program. So today we'll hear about these rates as Dr. Dennis will review them and discuss potential strategies to consider, as well as trade-offs between different USDA-RMA insurance products based on your chosen strategy. So again, we have Dr. Elliott Dennis with us. He's an associate professor and livestock economist with our Center for Ag Profitability. He's been with UNL in the Department of Agricultural Economics since 2019. His research often looks at issues related to livestock producers and policymakers, among numerous other interests. As you have questions, we definitely invite you to type them into the Q&A panel or the chat in your Zoom window, and we'll be happy to get those answered by the end of the presentation. So, Elliott, I will turn it over to you to take it away. Oh, you're muted there, Elliott.
Yep, thanks for having me on the webinar today, Ryan. As Ryan mentioned, we went over just how weaned calf risk protection works, and today I'll provide just a brief overview if you're not familiar with it, and then we'll go into specifically some of the pricing and also kind of historical payouts for the program. Some of that work I've been doing with some colleagues of mine at the University of Arkansas, and so we'll kind of share some of that as well. Okay, so as a reminder, this is the Weaned Calf Risk Protection is a pilot program, and it covers yield or weaning weight and revenue protection. There is really 3 products from this. For spring-born calves, you can have yield protection, so it just basically pays you for a reduction in total weaning weight. You have revenue protection, which is essentially that combination of the weight that you would produce times an average market price. And that's where the distinction kind of comes in. You can choose 2 different reporting windows or price discovery windows. One that we just experienced between December 15th and January 15th, and the other one would be through the month of October. All of them would focus on the November feeder cattle contract. This is a pilot program. It's rolled out similar to other RMA products, which they start with a few select states, which generally would have the most interest or need. And they use the kind of experience that they learned from different payouts and programs and questions to kind of refine the product. And then if it's used and there's general use across the board, then they generally roll it out to the entire United States. Nebraska is one of those 4 states in which it can be used, and it can be purchased within any county in Nebraska. So to give you an idea of kind of what the timeline looks like, as I mentioned, we were in this kind of price discovery stage, December 15th to January 15th. Now we have from basically January 16th all the way to January 31st to make a decision if we want to purchase weaned calf risk protection. If we do, we need to find an agent and who's willing to sell it to us, and that not all agents are selling weaned calf risk protection. And then after January 31st, we are unable to purchase that product until the following year. So this would be similar, very similar to traditional crop insurance, where this is a kind of a set deadline and you either are in it or you're not. This contrasts to what's been talked about a lot both at the Center for Ag Profitability and just in the market in general, which is Livestock Risk Protection, which just covers output price, and it can be purchased any day that the market's trading. So as mentioned, this is kind of where we were at. We just experienced December 15th to January 15th, and we have the 31st deadline. Weaned calf risk protection is a little bit different than livestock risk protection, because weaned calf risk protection will basically cover the yield or the weaning weights, or it will cover the revenue protection or the revenue. So think of weaning weight times a price. And that's different than livestock risk protection, which only focuses on an output price. So it just covers the future or expected output price. So that's kind of the primary differences between weaned calf risk protection and LRP. So as I mentioned, that price discovery happens on a national scale. So they use the November 2025 feeder cattle contract, and they look at kind of trading that happens, but then that doesn't necessarily get it back to what Nebraska price could be. And so similarly, like basis adjusts, allows for basis adjustments. They come up with a regional price conversion. I'm not going to go into the details on how that's calculated, but they convert it back from that futures price to a regional price, of which Nebraska is part of the North Central region. So that price is going to be the same for, within Nebraska. And it's normalized to a specific weight, which is 650 pounds. They do have a price weight slide that they put around it. And so if you, that price is specific to 650 pounds. If you wean at lower weights, there will obviously be a price adjustment due to the price weight slide. If you wean heavier than 650 pounds, there'll be a weight adjustment down. So this is what the trading volume and basically price direction looked like from the the November 2025 feeder cattle contract. It had moderately to light trading. We've seen two pretty consecutive runs from January 15th or from December 15th to January 15th. This was a similar run that we had last year, although last year it didn't have this kind of I'd call a retraction in the market. And so this was kind of the average price. And based upon this, the market trading, the projected price for steers and heifers is $288 or $2.88 for a 650 pound steer. That's the projected price that one can choose to accept. So if you're going to use yield protection, it's obviously irrelevant what that price is, because it's all about weaning weight. For revenue protection, this would be, if you took $2.88, this would be revenue protection with harvest price exclusion. So this would be the price. You wouldn't worry about any other price discovery. If you choose to do revenue protection would allow you to select either this price, the 288, or whatever that price is from the market trading from October 1st to October 31st. So how does that compare to where prices are at? This is an example of that dotted line going across the screen. The black dotted line is the target price, or 288 100 weight. And we have the steer price, which is in kind of the yellow line, and the heifer price historically in Nebraska, which is that orange line. The difference is the steer heifer spread that changes through season and as a reflection of kind of the replacement demand. But you can kind of see this is an average price. So if they assume that if you're weaning, or if you have 50 head that you're calving out this spring, that 50% will be steers and 50% will be heifers. And so this is kind of where historically through time where that's been. This gives you an idea of where kind of steers and heifers have been kind of seasonally. So this one would kind of tell you through time. This one tells you kind of what generally the seasonal patterns would be. For 5-6 weights, we generally will increase, prices will generally increase through the first part of the year, kind of middling out in the summer and then decreasing for the fall run. It's the typical seasonal pattern. Right now in Nebraska, those prices are at $365 for 5 to 6 weights. So this is obviously that kind of longer for that weight class. And for steers, 700, 800 pounds, we're about 290 in Nebraska right now. And notice once again, kind of similar pattern. Looking for the November contract, we tend to kind of rise through the first part of the year and then coming down. If we were to kind of take the same average here, we would probably follow the same gap from 7-8 weights. We would be in that 290 path as well. So a little bit of a discount, I'd say, relative to kind of where the current markets are at, but this will change pretty dramatically. Imagine once we have the January cattle inventory report, we kind of know number of cows that have calved or are expected to calve, and the heifers held back for replacement is the big number. So if you wanted to go and access these quotes and you're just curious about your county in your area, this is kind of how you get to those. USDA recently the RMA website recently went through a facelift. So this might be a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. So if you go to USDA-RMA.gov, this will be your landing page. You'll go to Tools and Reports. Then you'll get this actuarial information from the browser. And then you can kind of work your way down, choose the year, choose weaned calf, and the type of protection you want, yield protection in Nebraska for Adams County. As a reminder, weaned calf risk protection is a county, animals in a certain county is where the insurance attaches to. So it's really important that you tell your insurance agent that if you're going to move cattle across counties, you need to look at kind of those insurance rates across different counties. They have different weaning weights. They have different premium rates. So if you're going to go and that premium rate is going to reflect the risk within that county. USDA-RMA generally defers to whatever is the highest premium county receiving. That will be the premium rate. So cattle attach to the premium rate within the county. So this will be kind of your landing page once you go through all that information, and then you can kind of see the projected price and the volatility factor. This is a subsidized program. The weaned calf risk protection is subsidized, and kind of the subsidy goes down as the coverage level goes up. So higher amounts of coverage basically reduces the subsidy level, which is typical. It follows standard crop insurance kind of subsidy and coverage levels. So the question, if you're trying to decide right now between looking at that revenue protection price and kind of what it might be if we were to look at in the October price. So essentially what I did is I looked at the futures contract and what was the average futures price in November, or the November contract between December 15th and January 15th, and then looked at what the difference was in between that average price that traded during October relative to the November contract. And so the difference, if it's higher than 1 over here on the right hand side, if it's higher than 1, that generally means that the November price is higher than the January price. So that means is actually that the market would discount that price discovery. And what you see here is that the difference between selecting what we'd say the revenue protection which is this right-hand side, and the revenue protection harvest price exclusion is really this bottom number here. This is the risk. So obviously there's less risk in the market as we're closer to November contracts. So there is, I'd say, good reason to say that revenue protection is generally the, I guess, price-wise, the best way to go. But really what we wanted to look at was, even though it's going to be more expensive, so what will actually be the price difference? So I'll just go to that right now. So what we essentially did is we did some modeling to say, okay, if you choose these 3 different coverage levels, what would actually be what we call our net indemnity net of premium. So this is actually you pay a premium, any payouts that happen to you, you take away that, and what is the value left over. So if it's negative, that means you're actually paying more than what you're receiving back in benefit. So you want to see, basically positive values. This will vary by different counties, but what I wanted to show was just a general example. We have this for every county in Nebraska, so if you have specific questions, you can more than welcome to contact me, but this is just for Cherry County. So if you look at that, historically, Cherry County, as we go from 50% coverage level to 85% coverage level, basically that net indemnity or net premium after paying our indemnity, or net indemnity after paying our premium, is about $12. It's not a huge difference between 80 and 85%, but notice that harvest price indemnity, net indemnity, is actually higher than what it would be with harvest price exclusion. And most notably is the yield protection is negative at high levels. It's not negative at lower levels, but definitely at higher levels. And this is a reflection of how that premium actually works. It starts pretty low, but then as you get higher and higher levels, it increases what we call exponentially. So I found this particularly fascinating because when I've talked to producers about the risks that they're most concerned about and what they feel like crop insurance should cover, they generally focus on yield protection or weaning weight. But actually, if you were just to use weaned calf risk protection, for Cherry County over the last 25 years, actually you'd be paying out, almost $13 per weaned calf, more than what the product would actually bring you. And in fact, a revenue protection for this specific county would actually have paid you out more net after you've already paid your premium. So another way to look at this would be to look at kind of the subsidy levels and how the subsidy actually makes a difference. And so the way that we kind of look at this is we use this term called a certainty equivalent, which is essentially the money that you would need to be paid in order to be indifferent between choosing 2 options, no insurance versus insurance. And what you see is that the subsidy does make a huge difference in making this product work. Unsubsidized, what we call certainty equivalence, is always negative. And subsidized certainty equivalence, or this value that you would need to be paid, is positive when it's subsidized. So it does, and the subsidy does make a difference. That was for revenue protection, and this is revenue protection with harvest price exclusion. Notice that in this case, this is once again for Cherry County, percentages are going from left to right, that they're both positive. So in fact, the subsidy level, does still make a difference, but to less extent for harvest price exclusion. But it's still, the difference is pretty dramatic between if you received a subsidy and when you don't receive a subsidy. So just kind of summarizing that, uh, if we're looking for Cherry County over the last, I think they start in 2021 to 2024. If you were to pick a coverage across all those areas, revenue protection at 85% coverage, you would essentially be, you'd have the highest net indemnity payout essentially to the producer. But what I wanted to point out is that there is no huge difference. I mean, there is some monetary difference between 80 and 85%, but it's pretty minor. So if you were to choose between 80, 85, it wouldn't make a big difference for revenue protection in Cherry County. But essentially when we think about kind of revenue protection, what it's trying to do is it's really trying to protect kind of downside risk into two areas. It's trying to protect kind of reduction in price and the reduction in the actual weaning weight. So if we're thinking about that type of coverage, that's, at least for Cherry County, that's the product that has tended to work the best in weaned calf risk protection. Once again, if there's other counties that you have that you want me to look at and send you that information, I'm more than happy to do so. So one of the things that I think is important is that if you're going to use yield protection, it requires a large amount of historical information. They essentially have to create what your what's equivalent to your average production history. They have weaning weights. You have to have third-party verifiable records. These do vary by county, and so where you're at and where your cattle are at, and if you rotate pastures does make a difference. I just chose essentially one major county from the different crop reporting districts within Nebraska to kind of show you that variation. Most notably is that over time, these have tended to stabilize. There's not huge movements over the last, 7 to 8 years. Right? And this gives you an idea of like when we're talking about that, yeah, I would say the other big question that I get when I talk about livestock risk protection is just kind of the premium cost. And what you can see here is that yes, the premium cost does actually ramp up quite dramatically. If we're thinking about premiums per head on a 650-pound steer or heifer, I mean we're talking $71 a head, and so it can be relatively more expensive to use this type of risk protection. I would say as you start to look at that premium and it's high, this is kind of why we wanted to highlight this, is that actually when we think about historically over time payouts from the futures market, using futures prices and historical weaning weights, we can actually see that even though you're paying a higher premium rate, there are indemnities historically paid out to you. And so that's something to consider. Obviously, looking at your operation and seeing if it works for you is always important. This is what I found interesting, is that these are the contract or insurance plans that were taken out in 2024, so last year. Every single contract that was pulled was a revenue protection policy across the entire United States. These were policies that earned premium. So if you think about, these weren't large policies, right? There was only, across all 4 states, there was only 12 policies sold, and for good reasons, right? In Nebraska, there was 2 policies sold, and they only covered 29 head. So it wasn't a huge amount. Now we don't know if they've been paid out yet because the commodity year is still in progress. But I thought that was interesting given our findings that revenue protection was generally the best option for Cherry County. So looking forward, when we think about, should this be the right product for you? As I mentioned, three things to consider. We have to think about what this price weight slide is going to do, and whether there's going to be discounts or essentially premiums to overproducing or underproducing to 650 pounds. Backgrounding, if you background cattle post weaning, there is a fixed adjustment factor, 1.5 pounds of average daily gain from the time that you wean to the time that you finish your backgrounding. And so that can, say, artificially increase or decrease what your actual weaning weight is, depending upon how aggressive you are in your supplementation program. And the third consideration is that, as I mentioned, weaned calf risk protection within cattle within a county cannot be used with livestock risk protection. So you cannot use these two federally subsidized programs together. You can use one or the other. However, it doesn't prohibit you from using CME futures and options. And there's a large body of literature and information that we know that you can effectively use crop insurance with different hedging techniques. And so that's still available, but you cannot use LRP and weaned calf risk protection for cattle in the same county. If you have cattle in two separate counties and they don't ever mix, you could use weaned calf risk protection on one and LRP in the other, but they could never commingle. And once again, weaned calf risk protection is a tool in the entire toolbox that we have. But it's important to know, like, what type of risk are we trying to manage and what impacts us and what bothers us. So before we had weaned calf risk protection, we had no way to actually ensure weaning weight or total pounds produced. Now we have weaned calf risk protection, yield with yield protection. Revenue protection now gives us the ability to manage total pounds of production, and that's through the pounds of production output price. And essentially we have to choose between revenue protection with or without harvest price exclusion. So those are kind of the primary tools. And of course we have livestock gross margin, which would cover kind of a larger aspect. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to questions or things that you've thought about or heard about related to the weaned calf risk protection, and in particular to pricing of it.
So Elliott, thanks. And we do invite anybody to type questions into the Q&A or into the chat. Looks like a number of the questions in the chat that we've gotten have been answered already. Maybe if you could review again, there was a question if LRP historically would be superior to weaned calf risk protection. But
Yeah.
It's a new program, so I don't know what your view.
Yeah, it's not, you can't compare LRP and weaned calf risk protection well because they function differently. LRP is all about output price risk, and weaned calf risk protection is either yield protection or it's revenue protection. The only way they would compare that would be kind of net payouts. The reason why that's difficult is because you can basically take out an LRP contract at any time. So that would be a little bit more difficult, but LRP has its place, right? Weaned calf risk protection isn't trying to, I'd say, replace LRP. It's offering a different tool to cover a risk that you might be concerned about. And so when I've talked to producers, I do a lot of livestock risk protection, PRF, insurance talks, is what oftentimes producers struggle with the most is not necessarily how the product works. It's pretty simple, LRP, it sets a floor price, but it's when you actually take out LRP, and because you can take it out every day. That's the difficult portion for most producers. And so LRP, weaned calf risk protection, different tools, So that's kind of sums that up.
Great, thanks, Elliot. We have a few more, excuse me, a few more here. One is asking if you could just run through how to find RMA on the USDA website again to view the county rates.
Sure. And these will all be these slides will be posted as well. So you can, don't get it now, then you can always go to cap.unl.edu. And they'll be posted there, and you'll be able to walk through the PowerPoint as well. But anyways, if you go to USDA-RMA.usda.gov, go to tools and reporting, do the drop down arrow, click on actuarial information browser, and then it will take you to this. On that left-hand side, it should be this AIB down here. You'll click that, and it will pull up to this 2024, and then you have to go and select all this information.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question asks, do price and weight have different risk profiles or variants? Which has the largest weighting in RP premiums?
I don't do price weight have different risk profiles. I do not believe they have different risk profiles. The variance is set, so they have the volatility factor that stayed. Last year it was, I think, 0.17. Can't remember what it was this year, but it's at a 650-pound steer or average steer heifer. And in order to adjust that's the price. That's where all the risk gets factored into. And then they do a back calculation to essentially develop the price weight slide, which would allow that price to be adjusted upwards or downwards depending upon weaning weight. If you're interested in kind of how that's calculated, in the PowerPoint slides that I'll send to Ryan after the PowerPoint, in the appendix or after that last questions and answer, I'll put in the calculation there for you and how they actually make that adjustment.
Perfect, thanks. And I did put in the chat to everybody the direct link to our webinar page at the Center for Ag Profitability. So it's there that you'll be able to find this recording and slides posted. It should be up by tomorrow afternoon. You can also find the webinar Elliott did a couple of weeks ago with more of an overview of weaned calf risk protection. And Elliott, next question asks, is the county chosen based on the month that the coverage expires and where they're located?
So I think it's a kind of a two-part question there. Just go here. So here you have your calving period. So this is where they start calving is the county in which they originate in which the county or the insurance needs to be attached to. So if you start calving in Custer County, you would take out the insurance policy for Custer County. But if you move cattle at any point during this time, you are required to report that to your insurance provider, and then there could be an adjustment. So when you're saying the coverage where that located when it expires is at weaning, if they move at any time during from the time they're weaned, then it could be the insurance could be changed. So if you have a summer pasture, a fall pasture, and they move, then the premiums could be adjusted. That's why I said it's a good program, but there are some details that you need to work out with your insurance provider so that you don't get kind of caught without knowing. The big thing is, after weaning, you got to let gotta let them know when you wean, and they have to have someone come out there and wean. And essentially the contract, if you sell them, yeah, it essentially finishes once the cattle weight are weaned. So if
Great.
you're weaning in November and they come out and they weigh the cattle, contract essentially is finished. If you decide I'm gonna retain the cattle, but I'm gonna wean at this date, but I'm not gonna take weights, then you give notification that you're weaning, but then you're gonna sell it at a different time, end of January, then at the end of January when you actually get the whatever sale weight, you go to your sale barn at end of January to sell it. They will then adjust back when you said you weaned and basically take number of days times 1.5 and subtract that to get your weaning weight. So once weaning weight has been established, then the contract is essentially, finalized.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Elliott. We'll give a minute here if you have a question you want to get typed into the Q&A or chat. While we're waiting on that, I want to let you know if you are here in Nebraska, if you provide or if you pay for custom rates related to livestock services, one of the extension publications that the Center for Ag Profitability produces is now a livestock-related custom rates report, and we are currently seeking survey respondents for that. So again, if you provide or pay for custom rates related to livestock here in Nebraska, I just put the link in the chat, and also there's a slide here that you're seeing. We would love to have your input on the survey. I think those are due by the end of February, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, February 28th. And that report should come out later this summer. So we'd love to hear from you if you fit that bill. And I don't see any other questions right now, but please do get a hold of us if you have any that come to mind after this webinar, or if you go back and watch the recording again, we're here to help. And again, you can find that recording on our website at cap.unl.edu. Excuse me. So with that, I think we will wrap it up, unless, Elliott, you have any other things to tack on the end here.
No, I just say if there are questions, feel free to reach out to me. This is a new program, so I think I'm learning from just questions that you ask. I interface with RMA as well, and so there's been a lot of improvements from 24 to 25 that I've seen, and I think that's a lot from our input that we share with them and kind of clarifying questions. So if there are those questions, feel free to pass them along to me, and I'll do my best to get them answered.
All right, great. And when you close out today, you should see a really short survey that just tells us how this webinar went and provides feedback for future webinars that we do here through the center. So we'd really appreciate if you just take 30 seconds and complete that when you close out. So with that, thanks again for attending today. And thank you, Elliott, for the great presentation. And I hope everybody has a great Thursday afternoon.